I'm Dan Kihanya, and organization is interesting. So I'm the creator and founder of Founders Unfound, which is a podcast focused on tech founders from underrepresented backgrounds. For my day job, I'm an investor as an angel and an advisor and mentor for startups. And then I also am co-founder of my fourth startup, which is Wisely, a fintech focused on financial wellness for Gen Z.
Hey, it's Kellen, and on Diversified Game, we have a treat. So get your pen, your paper, whatever your typing utensil, whether it's a tablet. I was going to say typewriter, and then I straight dated myself because I actually had to practice on those. I have Dan Kihanya of Founders Unfound. He has a podcast. He's a serial entrepreneur. His podcast, is highlighting those who you might not see on The Breakfast Club, you might not see on Oprah yet, but they're just, maybe one or two steps away. I'm thanking him already for coming on because he, as a serial entrepreneur, where you might have seen one business, maybe two, he's seen a slew. So Dan, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm incredibly good. Thank you so much for having me, Kellen.
Well, thank you for coming on. And I always like to check out other podcasts or setup, and I'm loving your mic, whatnot. I mean, that's a serious microphone.
Makes me sound a lot better than I actually am.
That's what I say too, and so do my editors. And I thank you, Elvis, Rich, and Taylor. Let me ask you, how did you get here? Because now with social media, people might see the 5 posts you have on Instagram, but you're very, have many posts on LinkedIn and see everything you have going on and think, oh, of course, he went to, it looks like a prep school in Boston. Oh, he went to Princeton. Oh, it was easy. It was all laid out. But I know that's not the case. So how do we get here?
Yeah, that definitely makes it sound a little bit different than my actual experience. Yeah, I did grow up in Boston, and I went to public school. It's a fancy sounding school, but it's a public school. It's actually the oldest public school in the country. And so I was fortunate enough to sort of get in there. You had to take a test to get in. So and I was a kid who lived in a kind of a working class neighborhood in Boston. My parents met in Boston, and my dad's from Kenya. So my name Kihanya. Anybody with that name is related to me somehow, somewhere. And my mom's from the U.S. and yeah, and for those of you who don't know a lot about Boston, there is some interesting aspects of reality around let's just say how divided it has been over the years. If you ever see the movie The Departed, they have this opening scene about busing and everything. That's when I grew up there, so it was contentious for sure. But yeah, I was fortunate enough to get into a good school, and they were gracious enough to give me some good scholarships. Otherwise, there's no way I would have been able to go there. And I was really glad that I had the opportunity. And I was glad actually to leave my hometown. I mean, I don't know about you, but when you grow up, your whole world is where you grow up. I mean, unless you're sort of an army brat or somebody who travels around and lives in different places, when you grow up in the same place, you think this is the way the world is. And it's so good to get away, in my opinion, it's good to get away from that. Even if you go somewhere else and say, oh, this is different and I don't like this, I want to go back to where I'm from, at least you have a sense of it. And so, yeah, so I was glad to do that. And I was good in math and sciences. And so I took engineering. And in college, I got my butt kicked because I hadn't learned how to work hard. And there was pretty much everybody at my school was either off the charts smart or they just ground so hard, and so I was neither. So I had to figure out how to learn some discipline and some skills around doing the academic thing. But I really learned how to think and reason, I think, a lot. And yeah, and so I'm not sure how deep you want me to go or how long you want me to go into the whole background, but I ended up coming out of there, and I took advantage of my engineering degree and went to work in the automotive business in Detroit, for Ford Motor Company. And it was a great place to start my career. I got exposed to lots of different aspects of both the technical side and the business side. But it was pretty clear after a couple of years, in my mind at least, that big companies were not the best environment for me. And so I began to explore what would I do otherwise. And so entrepreneurship sounded like something that was a way to kind of sidestep the corporate world, not really knowing what that meant. I just like thought, oh yeah, you work for yourself and you don't have to do any politics or anything. And so ended up going to business school in Silicon Valley in the mid 90s.
Wow. And we're gonna go into the investor side of you, but I want people to, Boston. I my wife and I got married in Springfield, Mass. And so I
All
know
right.
Boston well. One of my favorite restaurants in this country, Legal Seafood, is in
Yeah.
Boston. And so I get it, and the divide is real. Personally, I was Black Irish and Sicilian in certain neighborhoods when they would pull me in. Yeah, he got a tan, whatnot. But it's that divided where it's like pick a side. And I was Puerto Rican on the north side of
Yeah.
Springfield. Papi, ven aquí, hey, yeah. So and so as a Black man from California going to Massachusetts, one of my favorite states too, because I saw the divide. So I saw how to try to bridge that inside my own small circles. You are in Washington. We never met in Washington, but I always like to say Seattle is like Boston and San Francisco mixed together. It's like a interesting just mix. In Seattle, you have the same type of divide, except it's more of a liberal, hey, everything is fair on the surface. But of course, Black businesses are only getting 1%. Oh, sorry, I was 1.2% of the government contracts in most procurement offices. Do you see the same issues like in Boston that happen in Seattle? Is one better than the other for the entrepreneur that says, I need to get this business off the ground. I need to find money. I need to find opportunities. What side of the country do I need to be on?
Great question. I actually, a little context. So I actually moved back to Boston. So after I left for college, I didn't live there for I don't know, 12, 15 years. And then I went back when my kids were born, thinking I'm going to take advantage of this free babysitting from my parents and uncles and aunts. And so I went back, and it was very interesting to come back as somebody who had gone other places, lived other places, and also as an entrepreneur from at that point from Silicon Valley, what it would be like. And um, it was more challenging than I thought. I think there's a great tech heritage there from MIT and all these companies that came out of the post-war, Polaroid and Raytheon and all these tech companies. But it's not as, in my opinion, it's not as fluid necessary as the West Coast, in terms of people wanting to meet other people and connecting. So I think it also comes down to, if you want to start a business, you want to be around A, talent, B, investors, and C, whatever the context is for your business. So if you're selling a platform to advertisers or the financial services world, you got to be in New York, right? That's just that, there's no way around it. Those are those two industries, that's their epicenter, right? For instance, right? If you're doing some kind of straight up kind of classic tech stuff, the Bay Area can be good, but Atlanta and Miami are hopping. I think Seattle is really awesome for um cloud and enterprise. And so you got two big giants here, Amazon in Microsoft. And so in terms of talent, in terms of partnership, there's opportunities. But I don't think there's a one size fits all. But the one thing I will say is you cannot overestimate the need for talent. In a startup, it is everything. And there's two things I say, at least in the tech startup world, there's two things you're always doing as a founder. You're always raising money and you're always hiring. And even if you're not actively doing those things, you've got your radar out. You've got, you're at a conference, you're at a meetup, you're at the coffee shop, you overhear somebody and you're like, man, that person sounds awesome. When we have the funding or when we're at the stage, I'm going to come back and talk to them about coming onto our company, or I'm going to give them my business card and say, if people still have business cards, and say, hey, follow us, follow our social channels, watch what we're doing. We'd love to talk with you and keep in touch. And so in certain places, it's easier, I would say, to have a candidate pool. Now, if you want to talk about a diverse candidate pool, that's a different story. So we can get into that too. But yeah, it's interesting how you talk about Seattle and as being kind of San Francisco and Boston mixed. That's an interesting perspective. I hadn't thought about it that way. There's definitely a strong tech community here. I think for people of color, I think it's still a little hard to navigate, and so you really have to sort of work a little harder to plug in versus places like Atlanta, where it's like, I won't say they roll the red carpet out when you get off the plane, but it's pretty easy to get connected, I think, when you're there. So, and I don't know about Miami. You and John Q have, and Evan Leapart and a few other people that I know that are down there rave about it and say it's real. So I'm excited to have an opportunity to come down there and check it out.
Definitely come out here. I mean, South Florida, it's a good mix. In South Florida, one day I'm Cuban, the next day I'm Jamaican, the next day I'm Haitian. It's all about how many languages do you speak or can you pretend to speak? So and I like to kind of blend in. In South Africa, I'm Black and I'm colored. So and so it's just one of those things. Now, you were talking about conferences, and I always try to tell people, to me, for my career and my clients, conferences make the difference. What are some of your top 3 favorite conferences to go to?
So yeah, we're in a post-COVID world, so it's been a while since I've been in person. I think South by Southwest is a pretty hopping thing. I mean, Austin's off the chain a lot of the time. There's lots to do around that. I think from a traditional sense, the CES show, which is the beginning of January.
That's my favorite.
Yeah, that's always good in Vegas. Those are big ones. And then I think, everybody has their own industry, right? And I like to go, I like to spend time walking the floor, like kind of quietly or passively, just to absorb what's going on. But I end up spending a lot more time trying to set up meetings. And so I remember one year I went to CES. I never made it into the conference. I literally had meetings in hotels and offices around Las Vegas. I never made it into the actual show. But I think one of the great thing about conferences, whether they're the big ones like those or they're more industry specific, is, especially as a founder, you got to get out of your own mind, get out of your own office, get out of your own kind of rhythm to see what's going on with the industry, what's going on with the rest of the world. And it does two things for you. One is it gives you perspective, right? It's like you're just talking to your own customers and your own employees all day. Sometimes you can get a little tunnel vision. And the second thing is, and this is almost as important, you're going to go out and you're talking to people what you're doing, and you're going to validate what you're doing. So a lot of times we're our own worst critics, we're our own hardest judge, right? And like we're not moving fast enough, we're not getting enough customers, we're not building enough revenue, the product doesn't work as great, whatever it is, right? Because we're always trying to grow and get better. And that's kind of the mode we're in. But it's nice and refreshing to go to a conference and you start talking about things and people's eyes are like, wow, you're doing that. Wow, you made that much progress. And so, as entrepreneurs, we need validation because we get knocked down, you know, 20 times a day, right? It's tough, right? And so, so I like to get out of the office, so to speak, virtually or in real time. And some of those bigger conferences, they have parties, they have kind of after hours things. I think it's just a great way to build your network and to kind of get a different energy than the rhythm of like every day just cranking on the business. So in terms of an attendance thing, I think it's well worth it. In terms of being like a exhibitor or those kinds of things, that's a case by case basis. I'm cheap, so somebody says, "Yeah, it's $7,000 for you to be in this spot," which is like over near the bathroom, and it's way away from the main floor, and it's like, that's tough. That's tough, right? So, but it's a case by case basis. Some people use conferences as a main kind of sales prospecting channel, right? Like they can walk away from a couple of days with 100 leads and follow up with them. But for some other folks, it may be just sort of from an awareness point of view. I think there's more efficient ways to do that.
Well, I totally agree with you. South by Southwest, when we lived in Lubbock, I stumbled across that conference and actually saved a life. You had to give someone just on the ground, laid out,
Wow.
mouth to mouth, thankfully it was a woman, a light woman. So I think I could have carried her if need be, but the police and ambulance came. But yeah, just sitting down. I love that conference though for the musicians, the energy, and now the tech, has come because the tech folks want to be where the party's at as well.
Yeah.
And it used to be quiet, and now it's exploded. And CES, shout out to Synology, who I worked with while living in Washington State and got to spend an exuberant amount of money to the point it was like, hey, President, can we get a limo for the journalists? We've already spent $500,000, Kellen. Why not? So yeah, I definitely agree with you. Now, let me ask you, because I read Peter Diamandis' book, Future is Faster Than You Think. And I was like, wait, he has a conference, Abundance 360. I want to go. I'm starting to make my calls. Have you been to Abundance 360 and spent the $15,000 ticket to get in there? I know you said you were cheap, but just want to know. Maybe someone, gifted it to you one day.
I have not been to that particular conference. And yeah, you start entering some of these upper echelon Davos and the original TED conferences and some of that stuff. I'm a small time bit player compared to the folks that go to those things. But if you can find a way to get invited and have somebody pay for it, hop on it, right? The learning you do by osmosis, just being around some of those folks, not that they put their pants on one leg at a time, just like you and me, but they get to think, they have the luxury or the privilege of being able to think about the future and big things and not the day to day. And so that gives them opportunities to develop insights and perspectives that sometimes we don't get a chance to because we're grinding all the time. So yeah, so I haven't really, but I can tell you, I had somebody on my podcast and they were new to tech and they were like trying to figure out how to maneuver things. And the co-founder just called up and said, who she was, and she's an African American woman, and she's trying to learn things. She got a free ticket to CES. So I think that's one of the other elements that is changing. Obviously in the more recent years, is that there is a little bit more of an openness and sometimes seeking of founders of color and people who can represent diversity. Sometimes it's a little performative and it's sort of like just trying to check a box, But other times it can be like, yeah, we get it. We are missing voices that we need to have. And so we got to go find them, right? They shouldn't have to come running to us. So
Now, being having a Kenyan background, how much flack do you get in Mambo, Jumbo to all the Kenyans out there? Uhaligani. How much flack do you get for having a website that's white and green, which could be, like a Niger, all the Igbos and Yorubas, and not having more of a, you see I don't know if you can see my bracelet, but I
I
still keep
do. I
my
do. I
Kenyan,
do.
my Kenyan love on. But, I want you to talk about Founders Unfound, as well as your Kenyan background and how you've been able to, connect to Kenya, and possibly you've been to, Mombasa or Nairobi.
Sure, sure. Yeah. So I deliberately chose green and white because I thought it was representative. My palette is definitely green, white, black, and red, right? And so if you look at some of my Instagram posts, I use a red background. Red's tough because it's, if it's not in context, it can be a little overwhelming. But I'm cool with it. And I was born in the United States, so I like to joke with my dad. He'll be ranting about some politic thing in Kenya, and I don't feel it because I didn't grow up there. It's like this group is doing this and that group is doing that. I mean, I understand it obviously, but it's like I don't have that visceral, like that's my brother too. That's okay with me. And so, but Kenya is an amazing place. I have been. I have lots of family there, and my dad grew up. He went through all of the Mau Mau revolution and sort of the movement to bring Kenya to independence from the British colonial rule. So my grandfather spent 3 years in a concentration camp, and my dad had to change his age. He basically one day when he was in his like 60s, he said, "Hey, everybody, I'm older than you think because they changed my age to be younger. Because if I was 18 at the time that I was going to turn 18, they would have thrown me in a concentration camp too." So, there's lots of stuff like that. That's kind of part of the heritage. It made me really appreciate the freedoms we have in the United States. And I voted in every single election. I don't care if it's dog catcher, since I was 18, because, my family didn't have that opportunity. But today I think it's a really fascinating country. It's beautiful. People are amazing. People are beautiful. And it doesn't necessarily have the hustler mentality you find out in Nigeria, sort of that grittiness. But there's lots of entrepreneurs and tech going on there too. And I think, when you start thinking about opportunities in emerging places, the continent itself, I think is poised. It's got so many people. I mean, I think I don't know, something like 60% of the continent is under the age of like 26 or something like that. So all these people who are merging with technology that's been put in their hands, right? There's the ability to use phones and the infrastructure that's building up. You're going to see amazing folks doing things. And last year we saw the acquisition of Paystack, which was a very large acquisition by Stripe. And so and they're in Nigeria, but I think that kind of sent these shockwaves through the tech community and the investor community, like, oh, look over there, there's stuff going on over there that's legit. And so I'm super excited, and I've had a couple people on the show from different places, and I haven't had a Kenyan yet, which is something I'm working on. I have like 4 in the queue. So I'm excited about that for sure. But there's so much potential there. And the timing is great because I think, like I said, the technology infrastructure is available, right? 10 years ago, 15 years ago, you couldn't say that, right? And so that was a disadvantage to, people wanting to start businesses and do innovation. But that's all there now. And, not completely, but it's there for opportunities, for people to do startups and build amazing companies.
I say it's there. The reason I don't take this off my wrist, I've even tried my hand at investing in Kenya, as I've done in Ghana and Nigeria. And, I'm actually currently in a lawsuit because it made money, but we have to kind of teach this young entrepreneur, you can't take money, make money, and not share the money. But my editor, again, Elvis, is from Kenya. He's the best editor in the game, king of all YouTubers, and has various clients. So I love Kenya. It's more organized than most of West Africa. I'll say that. And there's a vibe, and I love all of Africa. I don't have a bad time, but Kenya is very special, especially Mombasa. Oh my gosh, it's just
Mombasa is beautiful. Mombasa is it's amazing. I've spent time there, and one of my cousins has got a real estate business, and he's been building properties around there for basically people from the diaspora who leave Kenya and come to the United States, or and they want a sort of vacation getaway place back in Kenya. And so his business has been booming for years for that. So
we're definitely going to talk about that then off air, because that's something that even my clients, we took 30 people prior to COVID to Kenya. They all loved it. We had 2.5, almost 3 trips sold out to go back to Africa. And so we are talking the same language, even though it's not pure Swahili, we're just doing it in our native tongue. But I love it. Now, when you started Founders Unfound, I mean, the name kind of says it all, but I want entrepreneurs who are out there, like the ones I'm going to tell about you, to say, hey, fill out his sheet, because I've interviewed many Kenyans who are doing business, and I want them to be connected with you. But, why did you start this? How did you start it? Then people want to say, and how much money are you making? It's a question I always get. And I'm like, how much money I'm making, I never tell, first of all. And I don't even know what money is, because I'm a crypto fan. So, it's all in the cloud and all over here, but I don't own any crypto, I tell people. I'm just a fan of it. Why did you start Founders Unfound, and what is it all about?
Yeah, thanks. So just to loop back on your lawsuit, this is an issue that has of kind of market maturity, and I actually think things like smart contracts with cryptocurrencies and blockchain are really going to address some of those things. So that's not going to be an issue in the future. And so it's very clear like what happens, and things get automatically distributed. So I'm hopeful for that, for that element to enter into things for sure. But back to Founders Unfound, a couple of years ago, and this is before COVID, before George Floyd, post the Trump election, I guess, I just started looking around. I'm a 4-time founder, and I've had some success, but I look around and I see there aren't that many people that look like me at the end of the day. And when you hear that refrain of there isn't anybody in the pipeline, there isn't deal flow, and you do a 20-minute Google search, and it basically refutes that, right? It's like, what's going on here? And so I do some angel investing. I'm not a professional angel investor. I don't do 30 deals a year like some of these folks. I'm an operator at heart. So I like to roll up my sleeves and focus on one thing, or just spend my time giving people my thoughts and counsel. So I was like, how can I help? And so I thought, well, if awareness is part of the problem, let's see if we can dig into that. Right. And one of the big things that I like to talk about is the fact that Black entrepreneurs, and I hope to spread beyond Black entrepreneurs to other groups as well. Um, we have superpowers, and I won't say necessarily myself, but the founders I talk to, because the resilience and the grit and the what the folks at Kapor Capital call the distance travel, right, is monumental in some cases. I mean, I've had people on my show who are homeless, who lost family members, who had lots of stories of people basically telling them you'll never go anywhere, setbacks financially, setbacks with health, and yet they show up to start these companies. And we know starting a company, there's pretty much zero easy about it, right? And so to have the courage and fortitude and resilience to keep going and to be successful is our stories worth telling. And when they're doing their startups and they have to pitch an investor, they don't have 45 minutes like they do with me to tell that story, to say, I we had somebody on the show a couple of weeks ago. He and his brother came home from school one day, and they're like young middle school kids. Dad had taken everything, left. That house is empty, right?
Mm.
And it's like, okay, now what are we gonna do, right? And he tells his story of his entrepreneurial instincts kicked in, and he has a great story about that, right? But if he's pitching, he's a fintech company. If he's pitching that to an investor, he'll tell a little bit about, here's my background, my probably his professional background, probably, kind of where the idea came from or what the problem that he saw to solve. He doesn't have the chance to say, here's why I'm going to be a great entrepreneur. Because I didn't start this journey on third base, right? I didn't start this journey with like, oh, I graduated from Harvard or Stanford and I worked for a couple of years and got bored. And I have a bunch of friends and family. They'll give me a couple $100,000 for me to go and see if I can build this business. And I'm trivializing it and kind of being a little superficial, but and so that's really what drives me. The entrepreneur guest is my North Star. I'm trying to build an audience. I certainly probably don't have even an audience as big and profound as yours. But at the end of the day, it's about the entrepreneur and having them tell their stories. And I've done 40 plus episodes at this point. I've never ever been disappointed. And in fact, it's always the opposite. I think, this business doesn't sound all that exciting. And this person, I don't really know that much about them, but we'll see. And they just blow me away. And they always just blow me away. Just, random things like, somebody graduates from high school when they're 16 and aces their SATs. And right, it's like, what? Wait, back up. What did you just say? Right. And that person's doing like a different kind of business. They thought they were going to be an engineer. And so I I love doing it. In terms of the financial aspects, I don't make any money. In fact, I put money into it. We're trying to build opportunities to have sponsors, and I have some stuff I'll probably announce later in the year around that. But when I do ads for the podcast, I do them for free, and it's with people who have affinity with the audience and the ecosystem. And as kind of a shout out to them, and also to introduce a little break in the because I do long form 50 minutes to an hour interviews, and so it's more of my way to give back. Now, can you make money at podcasting? There's certainly opportunities to do that. So I would never hold myself up as a benchmark or a playbook for how to be successful in that regard. But for me, it's about the authentic storytelling that the founders have an opportunity to. And I love asking questions that they don't get. Because if they go on other startup podcasts, they'll get a lot of questions about business model and what's your lifetime value, what's your customer persona, and we delve somewhat into that, but it's more about the stories. One of the best compliments or the best feedback I got was somebody who was on the show I always follow up with them to see, hey, did you like how it turned out? Did people reach out to you? And she told me, yeah, I loved it. It was great. And my brother shared it with my mom, and then my mom called me like right away and said, there was things on that podcast that I didn't know. So I was like, yes. We crossed a different into a different set of intimacy, I guess, around what people are about. And particularly Black women. I mean, if Black women ran the world, man, we'd have a lot less problems. They are, in particular, in my mind, um just amazing fortitude and resilience. And I think they have the great entrepreneurs that I've interviewed. They have this ability to sort of like take all these things on that I think even for myself I'd have struggle with, and kind of do it with like great sort of optimism about, okay, we're just going to keep going.
I love you being so open about that. And because it's the same reason why I do this. I've had radio shows where I've had to be there. And this is much more enjoyable where I can set up the time, work around the family time, my work schedule, and just hear the stories and but hearing the feedback of, wow, I never knew that, or I never even knew someone like that existed. I mean, from your story alone to the 13-year-old millionaire that I had, Christian the Truth Jones, who, is he could be a Kenyan or he could be a Cameroonian, whatnot. And people are like, he taught me how to make money. And for me, that is it. Because you might not listen to me. My style might not be what you like. I didn't build a business. I built a lifestyle that fits my needs because I'm a weirdo. And I'm okay being a weirdo. And you just have to be okay letting me be okay being a weirdo. So, I love that. And you talked about your give back and how it's the podcast, but it's my signature question. So I got to ask it, what is your community give back that you were doing? You kind of answer that. Or since the best is yet to come, one that you would like to do in the future?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's a good challenge, and I think you should ask everybody that. I like that. Yeah, so the podcast is one way to do that. I participate in a ton of mentorship programs, and mentorship gets a bad name sometimes because I think some people take advantage of it in that they serve their own purposes by doing it. I try not to do that. I've had mentor session. I think I counted the other day. I went through and tried to figure it out. At least 500 mentor sessions in the last few years. I'm actively involved in programs like Techstars, and we have some local programs here in Seattle. I try to get involved with folks like Black VC and HBCU VC, to try and do my best to be, I'm not the know-it-all. I'm humble enough to know that there's more that I don't know than what I know, but I have seen a lot of stuff, and so that's what I bring to the table for a lot of the folks I talk with. It's like, I was fortunate enough to go through pretty much everything you can go through in a startup, except for being sued. And so, I can say, yes, when we went through a situation like this at this company, this is how we did it. I probably wouldn't do that way again, or that seemed to work out okay, but that's just one data point. And so I try to give back that way. Like I said, I do invest occasionally. But I am all about, it doesn't exist today. Can I help figure out how to make it and have it sustained? I mean, one of the connecting dots for all my businesses that I was involved with in startups in the past as a founder or early team member is they all exist still. They all have, sustainability, and they weren't just sort of flash in the pan, kind of taking advantage of some, trend. And the influence I had on the product and the experience, evolves as it should, but it's still kind of that core fundamentals there. So I would love to see the opportunity, for myself to be much more influential in creating new ways to fund the start of the startup experience. if you're running the marathon, if a startup is a marathon, there isn't enough resources for that first quarter mile. And so a lot of people don't get on the starting line, or a lot of people drop out right away after the first, couple hundred yards, because it's tough, right? And you have lots of people saying, why should you do this? What is it that you're doing? Why should the world care? So I tend to focus my attentions, my resources, my priorities in helping people at that very, very early stage. So even if you're just thinking about starting a company, I love to talk with people about, here's a way to reverse engineer. You want to be starting your own company in 6 years, and you just got out of college. Here's what you do at the company that you're at, right? Like you got a tech job. Okay. Don't take, do well with the tech stuff, learn a lot there, but don't take the next sexy tech product job at the company. Go work in the accounting department and do the tech for them, because then you'll learn the business side of things, you know, um, and that's going to be much more valuable. So I like to be, like I said, top of the funnel, big at the beginning of the journey. And so the more that I can help people, the more that I can be, whatever influence I may have, the more I can be influential in getting other people's to focus on that. That's kind of what I would love to be doing more of in the future, for sure.
So is that how somebody gets, their first degree from Princeton in mechanical engineering, then they switch it over to an MBA in marketing and management? Because you're like, well, I got this science part out. Let me go, figure out the other stuff. Is that how that works?
I wish I could say that I was that strategic about it. Here's the reality. Like I said, I was pretty good at math and science and stuff, and I could do the engineering. But when I got to the corporate world, two things occurred to me. One is the really, really great engineers at the company, they saw the world like Neo from the Matrix. Like they just see this stuff that I just like I said, I could do the math, but I don't see what they're seeing. And so I was like, I don't know if I'm going to succeed if I can't be like that. And secondly, I was always interested in I had design responsibilities for certain parts in the car and stuff, and I would do that work. But I was like, wow, can we save money on this? How can we take weight on this? Like, can we do a new vendor search for this? Is that so? I was naturally going to the bigger picture business side of things, and so and again, married with this you know itch to see if entrepreneurship made sense. Those things converged, and like, well, maybe business is the place to go. So I guess it's my own ability to look back and have hindsight to say that you can be strategic and deliberate about that. And I like that journey. I'm so glad that I was an engineer, from the perspective is it taught me how to problem solve, how to frame a problem. I was telling somebody earlier today on a call, it's like I need the initial boundary conditions, is a fancy term we use in mechanical engineering. It's like, which is basically what's going on, like how fast is the wind blowing, what's the temperature, like where do we start from, and then move into where we want to find the answer. And so the reasoning and the sort of approach, I'm glad I had that. It's not for everybody. I mean, there's other ways to do that. We had somebody on the show. I just interviewed him. His show won't be on for another month, but he was a rhetoric major in college, and it's like, what is rhetoric? And he's like, I am the master of persuasion, Dan. It's like, I can take apart anybody's discussion, and I can and make them think that what I think is the thing that they should think. And um, so I think it's all part of our backgrounds. And unless you're sort of like doing something very vocational, or wrote like law or medicine or fixing air conditioning units or whatever, to me, college, especially undergrad, is about meeting people that are different than you, learning things that you've never been exposed to before, and learning how to think. Like, I don't know, high school, I kind of went through the motions. Again, I was okay at it, good enough to get into college, but I didn't really learn to think until I got to college. It's like, how do I reason things through and analyze and that kind of stuff. So
Wow. Yeah. No, I love it. I love it. Let me hit you with a question, and I'm going to say names because it's a company and it's big. And,
yeah,
I really, at this point, am just venting about some of the errors that I saw in Washington. And I could pick almost any place. But, companies like Zillow, I represent influencers, millions of followers, and you tell these companies, why don't you use influencer marketing? And now more and more people are at least listening. But Zillow will go hire somebody because they're known in the city. My experience, I'm sitting invited to a lunch, and I'm talking to someone who is, you know, talking about reaching the Black community and has a business in Seattle, but will have Zillow spend $100,000 on a ski trip to get better Black talent. I said, that's how we get better Black talent instead of, so me and another woman, I won't say her name because she may or may not like that, say, well, what about the HBCUs? I went to a HBCU. My wife went to HBCU. This woman went to what we call a Hispanic HBCU in New Mexico. And he didn't even know anything about HBCUs. He didn't even know that El Paso, had a Hispanic HBCU. So you get people, and Zillow would say, well, we got somebody who was of color to do it.
right,
And,
right,
in all fairness, I think his dad was Black, his mom was Korean or something like that, older gentleman. And it was like he was totally clueless and didn't even want to hear it. So when you say, hey, why don't you come do an interview with Black media? You get the Seattle freeze. You can't get anybody outside of having dim sum. And that type of passiveness is what's killing tech and diversity. Cities like Seattle, I'm putting you out there because the rest of Washington, it's in the fields and it's a lot of Trumpisms going on when you leave, Linwood or Everett. But what do you see, like, how do we get companies to get it? Just because you hire somebody who's of color doesn't mean, just like same way we have politicians, the whole, Black Congress, the CBC, it's a joke a lot of times. They handle what the masses want to handle. Asians can get a bill. Black people, you guys having problems? There's racism still? Wait, let's do a study. And we got to wait 5-10 years for that. What can we do? What have you seen that works, that actually gets people's attention besides someone having someone's meat on someone else's neck and them dying for there to be like, oh, okay, we need to get this person out and put this person in and try something new because we don't have a clue.
yeah. I mean, that's it's that's a big question, and I won't begin to profess understanding big companies because I haven't really been a part of them for a long time. I've sold to them and partnered with them, but to feel like I have an intimate knowledge of their priorities and their approaches, I won't say that. But I will say, I think, yeah, you're absolutely right. I think there's kind of different things, right? So first is, what's the intention? Is it legitimate? Is it authentic? Is it resourced? Right, like you said, is it just sort of like lip service, right? And what is, and I think it takes courage, unfortunately, not from a, that it shouldn't take courage. It's unfortunate that it's not more instinctive with people, but it seems to take courage to say, I don't know what I don't know, and I got to be open to all voices, all messages, beyond my sphere of comfort, right? And different companies, different people who have responsibilities for these things at companies, just like all human beings, there's a wide spectrum of people who will dive in and say, I'm going to make mistakes. And as long as people can acknowledge that I'm trying to be authentic um and sincere about what I'm trying to do, I'll do that. And other people are like, I'll take one step, I'll stop and wait and see if anybody's looking, and did I take the wrong way, and am I going to get blasted, and I'll take another step, or maybe I'll take a step back and just wait, right? I think companies are going through that right now. And you're right. I mean, people don't have a good sense of here's the example that I give my kids, right? And so you'll appreciate this, even though you're in Miami now, you're in Seattle, right? Seattle doesn't get much snow if you live here in Seattle, right? So, but if you drive 60 minutes, 65 minutes maybe east, you start to bump into where the mountains are and there's snow and there's skiing and that kind of thing. If I buy a car in Seattle, there's a lot of things I'll be thinking about. Snow tires won't be one of them, right? But if I'm out in that 65 minutes away and that's where I live, then it's one of the first questions I'm going to ask about my car, either when I buy it or afterwards. It's like, I need snow tires. And so I think there's an awareness bias, right? Where people just don't know. And when you explain that to them, it's like if you explain to somebody in Seattle why somebody needs snow tires, they'll get it, right? But they won't necessarily go there themselves. And so the 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 challenge I think we have also is that getting them to see that also is a burden that we have to bear, right? It's one of these rare situations where um they should be looking our way, and they know they should be looking our way, but they wait till we do this. Right, they wait till we're raising our hands and like, hey, look over here, and then it's like, why am I having to do that all the time? Right, why does Founders and Found need to exist? Right, again, I love the storytelling part, so hopefully that stands on its own, but its mission, I would love for it to be, I'd love to for it to be obsolete, right? I purposely named it Founders Unfound because I felt like, I'm always about the underdog. There's always somebody underrepresented, right? And so if we reach that joyous promised land where I don't have to be a black founder, I can just be a founder because there's so many of us, there'll be another group that I can support, right? So, but when it comes to being, having black diversity, we got a long way to go, and I think corporations need to just have sort of institutional courage and then put people in place who, the litmus test for them to have those jobs and that leadership is that they're willing to humbly ask, I don't know what I don't know, and I am sincere about wanting to make an impact here, not just lip service, not just signaling, not just checking a box that they hired somebody. And you're right. That's the other thing, is that um, particularly for the African American community, there's no one size fits all, right? We all come from different places, different perspectives, and that can stretch socioeconomic and cultural. Like, I get people on the show who are multi-generational African Americans. I get people on the show who are first generation immigrant. Either they were born in somewhere else, Caribbean, or somewhere in the continent, or their parents were, and they have different experiences from people who, whose families have been here for a long time, right? Um and we're unique, I think, in that a lot of other cultures, they can still connect that dots, right? If I was Jewish and I was born in America, if I was Jewish and I was born in Israel, I got that connection that I can go to. There's a set of, you know norms and cultural things that I can sort of tee in on. And whereas, if I'm from the US, you know, how do I connect to where my roots are? Right. And my cousin came to live here, and when she was an adult from Kenya, and she's like, I didn't know I was black until I came to the United States. That wasn't a thing growing
Yeah.
up. Yeah, we had white people and black people, but like that wasn't a thing, right? That's like when I came to the United States, it was right in my face from day one. You're black, right? And so I think we have a lot of work to do. I don't have any big. If I had the big answer, I definitely would be, on that train. But I also think that it's about discussions and conversations at an individual level. I think that, so many people don't have friends from other perspectives. political, cultural, ethnic, right? And if you aren't around folks to appreciate like what does it mean at a personal level when somebody says Black Lives Matter, not just some, you know, political evaluation of that. Is it good? Is it bad? Is it, you know, whatever? But like, what does it mean to somebody like that, you know, right? That you, like you said, like your kids go to school together or you work together or you play pickup hoops in the park with or whatever it is, right? And so those conversations don't happen enough in my opinion, and those ones in particular I find pretty hard in Seattle. And I don't know how to solve that. I try to maneuver as much as I can around different groups and people, and but it's still pretty hard.
Yeah, I found it because of some of the groups and even a men's group that I'm part of, Dads, which to me is the most multicultural group. Now, folks who don't believe or read in the scriptures, I mean, you don't even have to, but people come sometimes that say, I'll let them read their Bible, their scripture in the Bible, but I come for the man side because it's where men can talk about men issues with even if you're not a believer, there's a moral compass, hopefully, that you have, and you can talk to other men. And so, Marvin Charles, I enjoyed that group, but I also enjoy the scriptures because I've been to Ethiopia and I've talked to the priests there, and I have an Ethiopian Bible, which I can say 66 books, there was more.
Yeah.
Why did they not give it to you? The same reason why in the slave days they didn't give the slaves the full Bible, but that's for you to decide how deep you want to go. So I love that. And any companies that are listening or CEOs, executives, this isn't go grab the blackest person with the dashiki on. That's possible. That's not the point, because that person too may not know about business and may not know how to do anything outside of, blacker than black. I'm black, y'all, taken from a CB4 line.
Yeah.
Finding somebody,
I love that.
you remember, that was a
I
great.
do. I do. I break that movie out every once in a while. I love it.
Yeah. So it's because it's really more than a color. Because once someone like yourself, Dan, they could say, you know what, you have enough money to be happy and be content, and you don't have to worry about all that black stuff. But it wasn't about you. It's about the founders Unfound, and that's what I want people to take away. That you're doing something that is bigger than you, trying to solve a problem. Maybe we won't see it in our lifetime, but unless aliens come down, and then we'll all come together and say, at least we're human. But, we've seen the movies. They're going to wipe us out if they come down.
Well, I mean, going through COVID, I didn't see us rallying. I was disappointed in our society and how we still tribalized and went into our own, like, what's in it for me. But you're right. I mean, you're absolutely right. And, I just try to be a stone thrown in the pond that makes ripples. I love that analogy because it's like I'm gonna sink to the bottom and I'm never gonna see where those ripples go. But I know that if I put out enough out there, then hopefully it'll do some good. And I'm not Jeff Bezos or anything. So it's like I'm blessed and I have gratitude for the things that have been good in my life. But I tell people, my mom wrote a book and she interviewed me at the end of the book, and I was like, as successful as you can be, growing up the way I did, somebody drops an N-word on me, I'm still that scared little 13-year-old kid. Like, why do I got to be different? Right. And that doesn't happen too often, unfortunately. But we're still in that society. We're still in a place where there's um, there's vulnerability that really we shouldn't have to continue to have in a country that's this old, that has matured in the last 50 years, supposedly through civil rights. To still be there is kind of tough. So the job's never done. And I am the product of lots of people investing in me, either directly and specifically and personally, or in the organizations that I was a part of, in the schools that I was able to go to. And so it's incumbent upon all of us to give back and to pay it forward and to and to use the gifts that you get for the greater good. And so that's what I try to tell my kids, and I got to live that life myself. So I'm excited about the future. I'm an optimist, and I want to be positive, and as an entrepreneur you got to believe that things can be different, because you have to use your imagination as a founder, because it doesn't exist today. And if you're thinking like, well, we got to solve this problem a different way, you got to be able to imagine that it's solved in a way that's different than now. So I have that inside of me, and so for society and for us as a people, I got to believe that my grandkids are gonna have a way of life that isn't necessarily easier, because I think challenge is good, but the stuff that shouldn't be a challenge, the thing that you can't control, which is how much melanin you have in your skin,
Hmm.
and where your family comes from, those things shouldn't be barriers for you, anybody.
At all. Well, you guys have got the game. If you do nothing else, share this game. It may change somebody's life for the good. Dan, I thank you for coming on, and we'll take this conversation offline.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you so much, and I appreciate what you're doing. This is a great program, and keep going, keep doing it, and thank you for being a powerful voice.
Hi everyone. Have you ever been curious about visiting Africa? Which African country were you interested in? Kenya, Nigeria, Uganda, South Africa, Ethiopia? Which country are you interested in? My good friend Kellen Cash Coleman came up with a course called My First Trip to Africa that'll guide you through this process. It's only $20, and in this course you'll learn about passports, visas, vaccinations that you need before you go there, as well as a budget, how much the trip is going to cost. He also talks about what you should pack, what you should take with you, how you should travel on a budget. Did you know that $100 is worth 1,000 South African rand and over 10,000 Kenyan shillings? So imagine what you can do with $100 back home. I say back home because I'm from Sudan, I'm African, I already know how it's like. I know that, when you convert Canadian and American money, it goes a long way when you're traveling across Africa. So if you're curious, if Africa is a place that you've always wanted to go, always wanted to move there, Kellen Cash is the person to ask. Check out the course. There's a little preview you can listen to before you actually purchase it. If you're interested in this course, visit www.diversifiedgame.com. Don't miss out.